Okay, zombies in the Bible. You wouldn't think you'd hear things like this and stuff, and the Bible doesn't have that kind of crap in it. No Halloween zombies or anything, or Walking Dead type thing, but sure enough, it does. And this old man says, I can't profess to understand God's plan, but Christ promised the resurrection of the dead. I just thought he had something a little different in mind. Well, here, if you read scripture real close, it tells you that we apparently just become undead zombies. Yeah. So, I don't know. That's not quite what we were I wasn't envisioning that. Weren't we supposed to turn into angels and float around on clouds and stuff? Yeah, at least that's what they tried to get you to believe. It just keeps changing, but then again, you go back to what this says, and it says that you won't die and all these things, of course, and then you get to the points that's important about it, and people try to fly across this because he tells you the second coming's coming and all this type of stuff, and everybody gets wound up in that, and the preacher says something about it, but he doesn't get real caught up in the exact phrasing here. Marvel at this not. So he comes up here, right at the very first of it, he tells you a father has life in himself, so he has given this to the son to have life in himself. And people have said, oh, this is the Father God giving it to Jesus. And no, this is something different. I'm going to have a reveal for you here at the end of this too. A pretty important one. Check this out though, and then we'll get to it. It's even a much bigger reveal than zombies. But I just wanted to show you this. Um, so the Father has have given him authority to execute judgment also. So people have the authority to do judgment because he is the Son of Man. Yeah, and we are the Son of Man is what he's kind of implying there, oddly. But I know you may not agree with that. But now it's saying that Jesus can give judgment because he's part of God. So that's the way people give it. And I'll tell you, there's another whole twist to this. But marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which that all are in the grave shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, and they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. I can of my own self do nothing, as only I can judge, and my judgment is just, because it's not of mine own will, but the will of he who has sent me. And that's a real telling phrase too. So, yeah, zombies. It's there's talking donkeys and talking snakes, and there's zombies. One of my wife's favorite shows is Walking Dead, so she could probably appreciate this quite a bit. But let's uh, let's look at some of the other phrases where we see Walking Dead or zombies in the Bible. So Zechariah 14:12 tells you, and this shall be the plague which the Lord will strike all the peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. Wow. I mean, so like you're gonna like do that thing where you're gonna turn into a zombie right in front of somebody, like yeah, and it's a curse type thing that he's putting. He's telling don't mess with Jerusalem or whatever. Well, I'm sorry to mention it, but after this, there's a few times that Jerusalem gets sacked right here in the Bible, and then of course we know of a couple more here that happened in modern history, and nobody's flesh ever rotted or their eyes sucked in or turned into a zombie, did they? I mean, I'm pretty damn sure I've never heard of it. Walking Dead, anything? No, okay, well, we're going to go on. Isaiah 26:19-20. Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise, who dwelt in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little while until the fury has passed by. Really? The rest of the dead did not come to life until 1,000 years were ended. This was the first resurrection. That's in Revelations, where he tells you that after the first resurrection, that 1,000 years later, then he resurrects the rest of them, right? But you're just going to be raised dead, running around. And in those days, people will seek death and find not. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. Wow. So there's going to be people that even that don't die, that kind of become undead that way, right? Like a lich kind of thing, like the not the dead that come back to life, but the guy that just never dies, like a vampire. That's cool. Okay. Well, let's see. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. By the way, when you look that up, that's been changed, and it's another Greek word. And coming out of the tombs of the resurrection went into the city, and many appeared. And I believe that whenever it said fallen asleep, it's vanquished. So it's not asleep. They're not talking that saints are laying around falling asleep. Okay? It says it again here, but and many of those who slept in the dust of the earth shall awake. So I think this shows you what we're talking about. People don't sleep up under the dirt. They talk about having a dirt nap. You know what I'm talking about? Sleeping with the fishes? That's what he's talking about. So they'll awake, come to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt, though. So everybody's going to come back to life and be undead. Okay? So, with my reveal coming up, this is weird to me because A, something didn't happen, and B, or we're all undead right now somehow, and then that doesn't make any sense. But he says, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, the twinkling of an eye, and the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable. Do not marvel at this, for an hour is coming when all in the tombs will hear his voice and come out, those who have done. So all these people in the tomb, the resurrection of life. Wow. Huh. Sorry, just reading a couple of these, and I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and their daughters, and everyone shall eat the flesh of his neighbor in the siege and the distress with which their enemies and those who seek their life afflict them. And this actually went down, people. But and so it shows you these. This is really not. And they tell them they sit and believe that their God, because he was kind of mad at them because they didn't do one thing just right. That because of that, all this affliction happens, and then they end up having to eat the flesh of their own sons and daughters. Wow, it's just an odd statement, isn't it? To even think through. And you don't think the God of the Old Testament was a little hot-handed, perhaps? Um, we were buried, therefore, with the baptism unto death, in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead of the glory, that we too might walk in the newness of life. So they're going to get up from the graves and start walking around. This is going to be undead walking there. And there's a few more here. You can pause it and take a look at them here, but and I don't know why they have the one with the decree of Caesar Augustus and going to the thing. It just doesn't have it. Here they have Satan disguising himself as a being of light. That shouldn't have. Here's around the shades to greet you. This is where shadows are actually demons that coming in, and whenever fire lights around and they flicker in the distance, they say that they're close, so they make people scared about it, and then they, but it's flickering shadows is all it really is. It used to be an old thing where people would start to tell campfire stories, and you would tell things about things hiding in the shadows, and then people look around, and as it flickers, they think they see something, and it makes girls get close. And anyhow, So here's where Jesus just goes right through a locked door, and they make sure they let you know that. 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you. And put your finger here in my side. Put your hand in the holes in my hand, and check me out, and you'll believe that I am the God." So there he is, undead right there. And so here he raises a girl. He says that she just died, but please come and lay your hand on her that she'll live. And Jesus rode and followed him with his disciples. And behold, a woman who had suffered a discharge of blood for 12 years. This is actually a period. She's had constantly straight for 12 years, they're trying to say. And she had some problem, which I don't know how old she is, but she's probably about to have menopause anyhow. But anyhow, she came up behind and touched the fringe of his garment and said to herself, "If I only touch this garment, I'll be made well." And Jesus turned and said to her, "Take heart, daughter, for your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. And after 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. This is supposed to happen in the Revelations and stuff. And yeah. And Christ being raised from the dead will never die again. So, and we just kind of just go right past that. But the weird thing here, let's see, where is this Ezekiel one? Did I pass it up? Yes. Here it is. So I prophesied as I commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a sound, and behold, a rattling, and the bones came together, and its bone to its bone. And I looked, and behold, there was sinews on them, and flesh had come upon them, and skin had covered them, but there was no breath in them. And then he said to me, "Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man." So he's Son of Man now. "And say to the breath, Thus says the Lord God, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live." So I prophesied as he commanded me. So in other words, he just said the same words. And breath came unto them, and they stood on their feet, and an exceedingly great army. And he raised an army of the undead. Kind of like in Lord of the Rings, Yeah? Or like in Sinbad the Sailor. Isn't that just crazy? Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Where's the other one too that had it had a earthquake? Yes, the very last one here. The tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So don't you think somebody would have said something about this? When the centurion and those who were with him, watching over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what had took place, they were filled with awe and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." But then they didn't tell anybody. By the way, back then, there's an earthquake, and they go, "Oh, wow, that's the power of God." Hold on a minute, people. Um, People used to record earthquakes, and there's not a recorded earthquake in the area during that time. Not even in Japan or anything. There's one, and they used to have earthquakes all the time. Back then, you can look at earthquake charts, and they had earthquakes all the time. They have 2 or 3 in a year in places and stuff like that. It was real bad, and that was the tectonic plates moving. But of course, they don't know how everything works, so what they do is they invoke God because it's some kind of magic. The earth's moving, and rumble, 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 and this is the bad guys up under the earth that are dead hitting the bottom of the earth and rumbling it around with their power of Satan and hell that's apparently under the bottom of the earth where the sun goes at night when you go to sleep. So I told you I was going to give you a reveal, and I want to give you a reveal here. The thing that I've found after studying this for 35 years and researching it is that there was a special thing that happened. Emperor Titus came down and destroyed Jerusalem, left no stone standing, just like it was said in prophecy. In 73 AD, but nobody pays attention to it. it was kind of mulled over in history, and you go back and look at it, and you only find a few things, but there was this whole story about it that Josephus made up. And when you read the Josephus story, it tells you something in there. It shows you that he actually goes from place to place, exactly like Jesus goes place to place, saying the same words, blinding the people that Jesus unblinds here. In fact, the very first place at Galilee he goes, they catch everybody and kill them, and they run the people out on the boats, and then whenever they're trying to pull them up out of the water, they're catching with fish hooks. Not little bitty fish hooks, but the kind that you gaff and pull up big fish with. And they say they're fishing for men. And at this point, Jesus says that he will make them fishers of men. There's a few other statements. You watch that. I've got a video on it. I don't want to go through the whole thing on it and everything, but the reveal is this, that, he goes from there to the city. He stays outside the city. At the point that he's there, Jesus waits, and so does he for special moment. What's the special moment? Well, Titus is waiting to get his stuff together, but also he's creating the big towers that go there and stuff. And so he says, it's going to be hard for us to build a tower. There's not much thing around here. It's going to cost us a lot to try to get this wood here to build these towers. Where should we put the towers at? At this point, Jesus, out of nowhere, one of his parables says, if we're going to build a tower, don't we first think of the cost? And that's an odd parallel. You come to find out what actually happens is he traps them in there like the Alamo, and they can't get out. He puts a rampart up and the things, and he's about to come in and get them, and he's starving them out. And it's coming on Passover. And the odd thing about this is this is the Armageddon that's in the New Testament, where Jesus says that I swear on the Mount of Olives, he tells them, I swear to you now that many of you will still be alive and won't die before you taste the kingdom of heaven. And everybody that hears that spouted out at preachers, they seem to think it's going to happen to them. But he's actually not talking to you. He's talking to the apostles who have pulled him aside after giving a bunch of parables. And they go, hey, when's this going to happen? And what's the signs? And he tells them it's going to happen in their lifetime, in a generation. And then he says, here, let me give you a parable about an olive tree. Well, olive trees are said to be 40-year generational trees. They represent that. So does a date tree, I believe. Or is it the fig tree? But then also, 40 years is a generation, just like they spent 40 years in a generation in the wilderness when they had to spend a generation to get it. 40 years is a generation in the Bible. It's an age or a generation. It goes all the way back to Nimrod, who supposedly died whenever he was 40. And that was the king's age. So, people used to didn't live that long. If they lived good, they lived 40 years, and then things happened. But anyhow, so interestingly, at the Last Supper, Jesus has with the guys the night before, and you hear a story in Josephus that tells you of a woman named Mary that while they were being starved out at the end, sacrificed her only son named Yeshua as the last Passover meal they were going to have while they waited for their Christ to come back. His name was Emmanuel. And if you remember in the Old Testament, the name is Emmanuel, not Jesus. That's supposed to be this warrior that comes back. Jesus came back as quite the wimp, but he was supposed to come back as a warrior. Well, he didn't come back as a warrior. He came back as didn't come back. He's a meal here, actually, listed in this. That's terrible. That's odd. She said he would become a myth for the ages, and that's about all he says about it. He also interestingly mentions 3 people on a cross, and he begs for them to come down. They come down, and 2 of them die, but 1 miraculously lives, trying to give a hint towards Jesus Christ and the fact that he did never die on the cross, and that they may not have even sacrificed somebody, or it may have been a symbolic thing. And there were symbolic sacrifices people used to do for 3 days and do a resurrection ritual for the sun back whenever they're doing a lot of sun worship. So Just kind of an odd thing. And it always happened on December 21st, and he would stay basically in a tomb thing for 3 days and then come back out, and he would be the resurrected god Mithra, and so that'd be on December 25th, and that's why. And if you watch the sun, it gets to the lowest point at December 21st, stays there for 3 days, and then it rises back up. And it's the whole zodiacal thing. And there's a constellation called the Southern Cross, and it's right there in the sky. And so the sun symbolically dies on December 21st and rises again on the following Sunday, December 25th, blah, blah, blah. That's where that comes from. You want to watch my video on Mithra, and check that out. It'll give you a little more insight onto that. But the other part of the reveal here was at the same time that he talks about the night of Passover, Jesus has the last meal. And interestingly, he mentions something which freaks out a lot of people when they hear it, because Jesus is always the smoothie, but out of nowhere he tells you that you've got to eat the bread and drink the wine, that when you eat the bread, you're eating of his flesh. And then when you drink the wine, you're drinking his blood. And you can't get into heaven if you don't do it. And it's something that we're stuck with after that, trying to do communion and stuff. But that's a cannibal ritual that goes all the way back to Baal worship. El, the god Saturn, and his son Baal are the Canaanite gods. And believe it or not, the ancient Phoenician word for Saturn, the star and planet, was Israel. That was their name for it. And so it's trying to equate everything to El. Look up my video on Saturn, you'll see it too. So yeah, we're all gonna, wake up as undead zombies. Or are we? Because I just proved that the whole thing was bullshit and fake, and it was Titus's rewriting of the whole thing, of really the conquest of Titus over them. And his scribe was, oh, here's the other big correlation. So Joseph of Arimathea, okay, and he's the one that got Jesus' body. Well, Joseph Flavius, his real name is Joseph Bar Mathia. So you just take one letter, really, and you move 2 letters, really, actually, to be exact. But yeah, Joseph of oh, by the way, no one's ever found Arimathea. It's never a country or a place or even a town that ever existed anywhere. But Joseph Bar Mathia is supposed to have existed, but that means he's the son of Matthias. And then they can't find him. Well, they tell you he's supposed to be a priest and he does all this, and they've already found the priests that were the priests in that place at the time, and it's not anybody named Matthai. And then, 160 years before that, they had one that was supposedly named that, though, and maybe they're trying to deify that moment. They keep trying, but Rome keeps taking in everybody else's stuff, Kronos was the Phoenician. All these gods that Rome has come from the surrounding gods, so that's where all this was pulled together and put together. And, here's a shocker. The Old Testament was done the same way. And I've got videos on that too. But, yeah. Enjoy zombies, undead, woo. Peace. Hey, if y'all like me finding this information for you, like the video. Give me a sub too if you want to see some more. Appreciate y'all.